What's up, amigos? Commander Jaime here today. Today we're going to go over Maelstrom Reverse, specifically in V Premium. So I'm going to go over the winning image, the deck choices, and of course some closing thoughts and wrap it up. And so let's get right into it.
And also for Valentine's Day, they're doing the new playmat with the new angel feathers on there too. It's pretty cool with Gabrielle and some of the no-seal on there too. Definitely recommend it to special someone for you. And so if you want to check out their store, check out the affiliated link and use the Commander Jaime code to get a discount on your next purchase.
So now that we have the new edition of Maelstrom Reverse, what does it do with the original Maelstrom deck? And so before I begin to dive into the winning image, what does Maelstrom Reverse even do? And so it has two skills. The first skill is that whenever one of your rearguards attacks the Vanguard and actually misses, you can lock one of your standing rearguards, and then this unit gets plus 10k until the end of the turn. So this will help you benefit from missing in that sense too. And then the second skill is that the fourth battle or more, when it attacks, you can counter blast one. This unit gets plus drive and crit. And then at the end of the battle, if this unit did not hit the Vanguard, then your opponent chooses cards up to equal of the locked cards that you currently have, that total from the rearguard circles and or hand as well. So for example, if you have 3 cards that are locked, your opponent has to discard 3 cards from either the rearguard circles or hand. And ideally, you want to get rid of the rearguards in the sense so that way they can start discarding from their hand. And I forgot to mention that the first skill is that if you do have a Maelstrom in the Assault, also when that happens to lock a unit, you can actually retire one of your opponent's rearguards as well, and you get to choose as well. So that's the big thing. So it helps you get rid of the resources and helps them drop further cards in that sense too. So right off the bat, I see Maelstrom Reverse as a different type of finisher compared to Glory Maelstrom. Remember, Glory has the skill that you can counter blast one. Your opponent cannot guard with more than 1 card from their hand, and then they cannot intercept as well. Furthermore, if you have a Maelstrom in the Assault, then all your front units get plus 10k until the end of the turn, which is big, right? Because the value of a guard, it can only get so big, you know. One of the biggest things and things that we will reveal with Bushiroad's Rumble Online event, Maelstrom actually made the top, so shout out to Zaee as well. And so grade 3 heal guardians became a thing, and so there's only 15k shields, and so the value of the guard diminished against the matchup in that sense, so it favored more in Glory Maelstrom too. So the way we starting to look at this is that we have 2 different types of finishers, and the basis of this is really on turn 4, and you can do Maelstrom Reverse on turn 3 against certain matchups such as like Night Rose or other decks that get rid of the rearguards, so you can really easily get to start them to discard value in that sense from hand. And so that's one way to look at it. But for most of my matchups and recommendations is really do the OG Maelstrom still, and the OG Maelstrom is then able to restand, and you have cards that help consistently make it the attack hit, so that way it could actually restand, because it has to see the rearguard attack hit on the 3rd battle or the 4th battle. And so that way you get a restanding Vanguard, and you have cards that help set up more with that and apply pressure at the same time. So really the winning image of Maelstrom has not changed much, with the exception of having an extra finisher or alternative finisher that you can use. And I'll start diving into the deck list, and it really starts panning out what the structure looks like. And you can already tell only a very few things have changed. And so let's get right into more in the deck list itself. So right off the back with the grade 3s, we are playing 4 OG Maelstroms. Again, this is the bread and butter of the whole deck and core. You want to play maximum copies because you'll be searching as well for multiple copies, so you want to make sure you have enough Maelstroms in your deck too. The biggest thing is you want to ride this in turn 3. And again, when this unit sees a rearguard attack hit the Vanguard, when it's 3rd battle or 4th more, you can discard 2, restand this unit. And then of course you have access to the other scroll where you can counter blast during the main phase, give all of your front row plus 3k until the end of the turn. That helps with making numbers. That can make some thresholds to making your opponent drop more guard, or even just harder to guard with, and they just basically take the attack at that point. So it's just how to calculate that and conserve that counter blast. But most of the time, you really want to use your counter blast for another card called Press Team, which is the grade 2s. That gives you extra drive checks. So that way you have a restanding Vanguard that could be triple drive, getting 6 drive checks, or quad check, seeing 8 drive checks. And then if you can get to that next drive check, you can get a bunch of like 10 drives in total, which is ridiculous if you think about it. But ideally you want to get to like 3-4 drive checks, so that way you can help really set up for your turn 4, be able to live, do enough pressure. And sometimes your opponent may not be seeing that, and they can just outright lose too. And going into Maelstrom Reverse, just like I mentioned with its skills, it's really better when you do a turn 4. And the reason I say that is because you need standing rearguards to actually lock for its skill. The more circles that you have to work with, such as 2 Excel circles, the more better and easier it is for you to set up and actually be able to get to 2 to 3 cards that are locked. So that way you can get some value out of potentially your opponent just guarding your Vanguard attack and then discarding whether it be rear guards or cards from hand up to 2 or 3 outside of that. And so you have your ideal situation where if it's low damage and you're poking for damage and they get a damage trigger, there's always been that issue with Aqua Force that you can no longer hit. But now your rear guards that can no longer hit benefit Maelstrom Reverse's skill. So I'm like, okay, so there's some value in that regard. It's even better though when they're at 5 damage. And so when they're at 5 damage, they have to guard everything regardless. And so you can really make some big numbers and they have to drop guard because they can't go to 6 damage, otherwise they lose. And with that, it really sets up Maelstrom Reverse to be even more pressure and also taking away more card attrition from them in total. And that's the biggest thing, is that Maelstrom Reverse is kind of flexible in a sense, but going on to Glory, we are playing 2 Glory. And I feel honestly you can go with 2-3 or 3-2. Depends on your metagame, really depends on your preference, what you're going for. But Glory is very strong still. Again, it has the ability to restrict guard in a certain way where you can only drop 1 card. And so if you, let's say your opponent, the highest shield value on average is 15k, like a Trigger, for example, or the Heal Guardians, right? So if you have a Vanguard that's 12k or 13k, that can only get to 27 and 28. So if you have a rear guards that hit that magic number there, they can no longer guard that with 1 card. They have to have something that's 20k shield, like the original heals. They have to have the 30k Sentinel crits, or they have the PG or Protect marker in that sense to be able to stop those attacks. And now when you have 2 Excel circles in your rear guard columns and your Glory Maelstrom himself, you can have 5 attacks guaranteed, which is way better at 5 damage. And one of the things that we saw also in the Bushiroad Rumble line event is that when the opponent was at 4 damage or 3 damage and they got a trigger, that Glory tank is no longer threatening. And at that point, it makes its survival rate for the opponent a lot easier for them. So that's why one of the things I wanted to try out is do 3 Maelstrom Reverse, well 2 Glory. So you have that option still, which is cool, really cool, and I appreciate that in that sense too. And a further thing to mention is that each Maelstrom card gets better with Excel circles. So if you do ride Maelstrom over and over, regardless of which Maelstrom you have, the additional circle helps because it scales really well in this sense. And so you have multiple attacks, multiple rear guards, and by the time your opponent's at high damage too, so they kind of have to guard everything at that point. So just keep that in mind as well. Going down into more of the grade 2s here, we have Alpedia, which is, you know, vital. This helps with the OG Maelstrom mostly. So the main skill is that when it attacks, you can counter blast 1, and then that attack is considered to be hit, regardless if it missed or not, or hit and miss, whatever. And so that helps enable the OG Maelstrom, so using a counter blast. So that's why you want to conserve that counter blast for this card, potentially. And then it has the nice skill that it gets an additional 5k attack and shield if you do have a Maelstrom as Vanguard. And that's super nice because it becomes a 14k by itself. It's a 19k on an XL2 circle in that sense. And it's just another beater / shield value that you could work with. And one of the things that you'll notice is that you start to accumulate copies of Maelstrom for other card effects, and so your hand quality may not be as great because you have grade 3s in hand. So Alpedia makes that extra 10k shield as a unit instead of 5k shield much more worth in that sense. And I wanted to maximize force, so a shout out to Zaee and also Axis Vanguard and Kasargi-san also mentioned about like Maelstrom too. They were working some deck lists too, and one of the things that I saw is that they reduced Alpedia to 3, but I felt like the importance of OG Maelstrom consistency, I wanted to push this back at 4, and also the shield value just helpful in that regard. But there's some wiggle room, so you can go 3 or 4 copies. The next grade 2 over here, we have Press Stream. Press Stream is really the better brother on OG Maelstrom, but it's also good for reverse Maelstrom. So what it does is that you can counterblast 1, discard a Maelstrom copy card, and then your opponent, your Vanguard that's Maelstrom gets an additional 10k in drive check. So now this is where you can power up your Vanguard. It's going to restand with an additional drive check with the OG Maelstrom turn, or turn 4, which I've done this before, especially against top deck heroes. Shout out to them too. I did a proxy play, so whenever that comes out, you can see it in action in that regard. And so you can counter blast 1, discard a Maelstrom copy to give additional drive checks to Maelstrom Reverse on top of that. So Maelstrom Reverse's skill gives it, basically goes to 3 drive checks. Now with 1 press through makes it quad, and if you use the second one, you go quintet drive. So it's just more triggers to be able to disperse onto the remaining rear guards or rear guard that you still have standing. And so that's why press stream is so important. And also it's an 8K that you can just kind of splat down, where you have the option to lock it with, you know, the Maelstrom Reverse skill after you do its skill to get more drive check and power. Or you could just have it swing by itself and it's an 8K. So you can purposely miss because it's so weak. Or you could put in an XL2 marker and make it a 13K. So you have some flexibility in that regard too. And going into the next grade 2, Flow Fencer is still vital. It's like a Coral Assault, where its skill is that when it attacks the 4th battle or more and you have a Maelstrom Vanguard, this unit gets plus 15k. And that's basically the 24k attacker that we rely on, 29k on an XL2. The other skill is also very important because when it's placed on Vanguard Circle or Rearguard Circle, you can check the top 7 for a Maelstrom copy and add it to your hand. It's a soft +1, which is very appreciated in Aqua 4s, but the biggest thing is that you grab your Maelstrom copy so you can have a chance to get the right Maelstrom that you want. Maybe you need to ride the OG for grade 3 consistency reasons, right? Or maybe you need to have options between Maelstrom Reverse or Glory depending on your situation. Furthermore, you deck them, so it makes your drive checks even scarier because you're affecting efficiently in that sense too, which is really nice in that regard. And then that grade 3 Maelstrom can also fuel the press stream that's right next to it too, so it's super helpful in that regard. And so that's why you still play 4, and more than likely it's going to be the last beater that you use on an OG Maelstrom or Maelstrom Reverse turn, because a lot of that has to make to the 4th battle, so there's only one rearguard left that can attack, and it will be your Flow Fencer with like a big beater, beat stack in that sense. Now going to Valeria, and so I wish this card was a little bit better, and the way I start viewing it is really like a backup for Flow Fencer. And it's because at the 4th battle, it actually gets an additional 10k. So it's short by 5k difference, but it's just another beater in the sense that you can rely to. The second skill is that if it hits, and then if it's the 3rd battle, you can retire a card on your opponent's field. You know, that's how you can diminish more riggers on that if you do hit. However, the power up is on the 4th battle, so the likelihood of hitting on the 3rd battle is not as great. But then if it was the 4th battle or more, you draw a card in addition to that as well. So you can get some advantage, which is kind of like the old Valeria from the original like BT series, like back in Vanguard started with Maelstrom. So it was just really kind of like nostalgic in a sense. So I feel like maybe 2 copies is worth. I can see this honestly be taken out as well, but it is a beater that you can rely to. And what's kind of cool with the Glory Maelstrom turn, it actually makes it better. And the reason I say that is because with Glory Maelstrom, you want to make sure you make numbers that are at least 28k or 33k and above, so that way your opponent can't really guard those attacks. So not only that, you have Flow Fencers ideally, and then cards with boosters. Now you can have Valeria with a booster as well to guarantee with the power up to make sure that you can actually hit through and, you know, deal that 6 damage in that sense, which is vital in that sense too, you know. And, you know, going into the grade 1s, we have at the very bottom left is the Radiant Assault. This also helps with the consistency of OG Maelstrom be able to restand. Radiant Assault is basically when it's placed Soul Blast 1. When this unit attacks or boosts on that attack, it's considered hit. So that's how you can get that free restand in a sense without using a Counter Blast. You use a Soul Blast instead, which is easy for this deck as well. And then in addition, if you have a Maelstrom in your drop zone, you can bottom deck it and draw a card. So you can get advantage back, which helps with digging deeper into your pieces, returning the Maelstrom copies that you discarded for press stream and other card effects too. So it just helps with that, you know, recyclability in that sense too. And so that's why you still want to play 4 cards. And then do note that you don't probably want to use this on Maelstrom Reverse because it's like the opposite. It's kind of reverse in the sense, the lack of a bad pun, right? You don't want to hit, and then if this makes it considered hit even though you didn't hit, then you really don't get benefit. So watch out for Radiant Assault. One tip that I would do is that you can use the skill to return Maelstrom and draw a card to get that benefit, but then you can use this card not boost anything but be as a lock target in that sense, so that way you can still kind of benefit from it without risking that unhit effect on a Maelstrom Reverse turn, if that makes sense. Now going into the next grade 1, we have still the Analyze Shooter. This card is very vital in the early game and moving forward too as well as you ride through your progressions. And so you want to stick this guy behind the Vanguard, even though it's a 6k, it's a booster, right? And so when the boosted attack hits, you get to Soul Blast 1, discard a card, and then grab 2 different Maelstrom cards from your deck and add them to your hand. So you literally +1 in that sense. And not only that, you can fetch for your OG Maelstrom with a copy of Reverse or Glory, or the other way around. It just doesn't matter, but now you have access to all your Maelstroms really easily, and it's just on hit pressure. And if you see this at turn 1, the likelihood of at least hitting once is pretty much almost guaranteed, unless your opponent is literally hard dropping guard early on, Like, you're still gonna get a search regardless in that case. And if you go second, you can discard the ticket shield if you want to get, the Maelstrom copy, so it's just an extra card to work with in that sense. So very valuable card. We want to play 3 because 4 is too cloggy, just like with the old days. You still don't want that because it sucks to write this card, and then it sees that when you see it later on, it doesn't do you any good. As soon as you see 1, it's on the field and it does its job at least once or twice, you're pretty much in the promised land with that card in respect. And so the next card next to it is Penguin Soldier. We are playing 2 copies, and so we do need some counter charge, which is appreciated too. So when you're attacking the 4th battle, you can retire this and counter charge. This is actually good timing with Maelstrom Reverse. So during your May phase, you may be using counterblast, and then as you're leading up to your battles, you may be using counterblast. But on the 4th battle, you have this guy trigger and also Maelstrom Reverse. You could do Penguin Soldier first to counter charge if you didn't have any counterblast, and now Maelstrom Reverse can use the counterblast that you just CC to actually do its go. So the synergy is really good. Or you could just rest and give plus 5k to another unit too as well. Or you could just use it as a lock target in that sense. And so it's very flexible in that sense, but it's just there for that counter charge ability is really important, especially if you're using cards the prior turn with Press Stream or Alpida, and then any other like counterblast effect from like the OG Maelstrom to give power up. It can be refundable, so that way Maelstrom Reverse and Glory Maelstrom are pretty good to go in that sense. The last great one that we have is the Bubble Corpse. But anyway, this card, all it does is that when it attacks, hits, or it's boosted hits, you can check the top 7 for a Maelstrom and then add it to your hand. It's another soft +1. It's really a wiggle room. If you want to go 3 Penguin or increase another card, copy from whatever's left, you can do that, or you can switch ratios to a different card. It's just really up to you. And we noticed with the trigger lineup, we're playing the grade 3 heals just in case we're going in against an aggressive deck early on. We want to make sure we survive. One of the things that you want to do early on in most matchups is really just use the Vanguard line to be able to attack, to do some damage, and have your opponent really attack your Vanguard, because you don't want to call a rear guard, then your opponent takes your rear guard, and then you lose a rear guard and you don't have enough counterblast to really explode on your turn 3, which is like your press stream and your Alpida, and then of course like multiple press streams in that sense too, because you typically wanted to have like 2 counterblasts at least, so in case you do have 2 press streams, now you can go quad check with a restanding Vanguard. That's a huge difference in that sense. So that pop turn really makes up for the lack of early game that you do, but you just never know that some decks are out that are really aggressive in nature. So being able to make your Vanguard plus 10k for the turn, or reducing 2 crit on an attack, that can still come up, and it's okay in the mid to late game. You have other cards like Alpida to help with that shield value to have the loss of the 5k from the heal trigger, if that makes sense too. And then with the rest of the triggers, you want crits, you want draw PGs in the sense. You need draw power, so that's why the PG draws are very appreciative. And then of course your Sentinels are the perfect guard. The 30k Sentinels, you do build up on a good amount of hand, but not all of it is shield quality, because some of it is actually the grade 3 Maelstroms that you start to accumulate in your hand. So having a PG, being able to make sure you can guard any attack regardless of how big it is, can be very vital. And then the crit pressure is there because you have a restanding Vanguard, you have Karma that gets crit and drive check additional as well, and Glory is really there just to seal the deal as well, making your opponent go to 7 damage. So if they do heal on 6, they can still go to 7 in those instances. And so really start wrapping up with the closing thoughts of the deck. It's not like it's a huge bump in power from Maelstrom Reverse and Valeria. As you can see, a lot of the original build that was already there with OG Maelstrom and Glory is still intact, and that's the biggest thing, at least for me in my experiences, where like it's still really good. This is just, it makes it a little more well-rounded in the sense, so you have a little more options against those matchups, and you can start experimenting as well, and really you just have another Maelstrom to work with. I know Kaze was playing 4 OG, 4 Glory, and then 1 Riptide, and this makes it that you can play full Maelstroms. You don't have to worry about misrunning into a Riptide, or you have at least another tool in your arsenal to be able to do a turn 4, turn 5 finishing turn outside of what you already have in that respect too. And I want to do a shout out to Meta Nerd. We did a collab review on this too, so whenever this was recorded and published, it might be out or not out, and so I will update the description when those videos are out for both Top Deck Heroes and Meta Nerd. So shout out to them, and I really appreciate them with that. And I would say, if you like a different alternative change, if you want to add restanders, just as Tidal Assault, Terrific Coil, to help with like attacking, and then it restands, and then if it did miss, you can lock that unit itself, so it helps kind of mitigate with that respect. You can experiment with those restanders to This is purely Maelstrom support, as you can see. There's only very few generic cards. In fact, it's probably only a Penguin Soldier now that I think about it. Everything else in the core that is not a trigger is basically Maelstrom specific in that sense. So it's just very solid support. And so I recommend trying it out for yourself. And so if you were to do this in premium, you probably just slap a G-Zone deck, honestly. And if you went first, you want to do a Maelstrom turn, and if you had the option to strike, you probably want to go into Gembold and really set up for that next finishing turn, and really depending on who you face in your matchup. Like if you're facing maybe a deck that builds enough hand but doesn't have G Guardians, you may still end the turn with Glory, or maybe you still go onto the strikes with Gembold or Alexandros or Valeos. And since your Vanguards are Maelstrom, technically still, because they copy the Heart's name, you have access to all these wonderful cards that can give additional draft checks, that can also get power, that can filter, and all these things that you can do with these options too, right? So that's pretty much it for the video, and I just wanted to share my thoughts and also experience that I've done with the deck. It is a fun deck too. I appreciate just playing Maelstrom again too a little bit too. And it's in a very good spot too. If you're looking for Aqua Force, I think this is a good deck to pick up. The other one that you would probably fall back to would be probably Favas Lambros still. You could have fun with Tetra Drive, but in V Premium, I know Tetra Drive kind of lacks a little bit too. And so that's one of my recommendations and things. And so I'm still looking more forward to more reverse units being revealed. Who knows what we'll get the next set for Aqua Force until next time. So if you liked the video, like it down below, comment down below. What are some things that you've seen with the deck, or some comments and combos that you want to point out as well? And share with an amigo, you know, an Aqua Force player or a fan that's a Maelstrom, you know. And so subscribe, amigos. Bye.